Why do I ride a bike? That's about as open-ended as it gets, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's been a progression. I grew up as an athlete. I was a swimmer, basketball player, football player, and played football in college. So between football and running in my 20s and 30s, my back took a big burden of all that. So I basically I had to find an exercise that was competitive, that could replace running, but didn't have any impact on my joints and my back. So I settled on the bike. I've been riding bikes on and off, training for other stuff, but I'd never done it with any focus. So I came to it really out of process of elimination, out of desperation. But that's how I got there.
What does the bike bring you joy? Describe it. Describe a moment of sort of joy or the perfect moment on the bike. What is a perfect moment? What's the perfect ride for you?
The perfect ride. The perfect ride is no cars to be seen unless I'm drafting off of them. But perfect ride for me is, kind of the open road. I'm in Washington, D.C. in the suburbs around here. So we have lots of rolling hills, lots of places where you can escape and where you can feel the wind and feel yourself moving through nature. You can hear everything. Your senses are completely consumed with the speed, the wind, and it's just you and that machine, and you're in touch with everything around you. And there's a point when you hit, kind of a little bit of a glide, and you almost don't feel yourself moving at all. It's almost like you're floating. That's what it feels like when I hit that sweet spot in a ride, and there is nothing like it. I seek that sweet spot out almost every ride. There's a moment when all of it comes together and I'm like, yeah, this is why I love it. And that feeling just gets inside of you and you chase it. You chase it during the ride, you chase it the next ride and the next ride after that.
Yeah, that's well said. No, chasing that is so true.
Yeah. It's
what
with running, there's a high that you get because it's percussive, the beat. And I'm a former musician, so for me, rhythm is everything. I'm a writer, so I do a lot on rhythm. And running is one of those things that sets a rhythm for my brain. It's like a heartbeat, almost like a metronome. Cycling takes it a step further. It takes it a step further because you are moving at such a faster pace. The decisions are faster, so the exhilaration comes even more kind of powerfully to me.
Yeah, I find riding in a pack to be one of the sort of great joys of life.
Oh yeah, it's because you have to sync up with the body movements of everybody else. And with some smart riders, with some experienced riders, it can be a wonderful dance.
Yeah, you think about no matter your politics, who you are, what you in a pack, you can see the potential of humans getting along.
Oh, totally. I live in Washington, D.C., where politics is a second language for most of us. I can tell you, I've been riding with the same group of guys for a few years. We don't, not only do we hardly ever talk about, if ever, what we do, I couldn't even tell you what half those folks do for a living.
Yeah.
It doesn't come up.
Yeah.
This is like the place where it's like the place where you lay your burdens down. It's like at the altar of cycling, you know, in the church, especially in the Black church experience, there's an altar call.
Yeah.
And you come to the altar, you lay your burdens down, they pray over you. And the feeling is meant to be sort of this cathartic kind of release, and everybody collects in that. And that's what it feels like sometimes when you're on the bike with the right people. You're just laying your burdens down and you're just out here together.
It's beautiful. I'm kind of done. Like, that's your line, man. I got it. We got it. We got, you know.
That's the
So
money.
let me ask you, because that's a really, like, that's a beautiful thing, and that's a thing that you could seek out on your own, but yet you decided to, you know, to do some formalized training. And I'm curious, you know, why did you seek out CIS? That's a different thing than what you just described.
It is. It's the more I've been in CIS, I'm in my third year. Just made brown belt. So CIS is an entirely different experience than just riding. I think Coach David talks about all the time. You can go out and just ride your bike, or you can become a cyclist. And I think when I found cycling, or got back to it with any earnestness, bought my bike and gear and all that, about four and a half years ago, I found a club locally and I started riding. It was a great experience, but I felt like I kept topping out with every ride. I felt like it was the same experience where, you know, the first few miles, I was like, oh, I'm hanging, I'm doing okay. And then I get dropped like a bad habit. And I was starting to hit a wall, and I was like, I'm not enjoying this. I'm not growing. And because of my background in sports, I understand, and even in running, when I took up running in my 20s, I learned to run. I went to a program to learn the form and technique, but also training approaches. And so this was a familiar environment. I was like, if I'm going to get anything out of this, I need to learn how to do it. So members of our club were also CIS members, and they held an interest meeting one day, and Coach David came down from New York and held an interest meeting with a bunch of our club riders, and I was in the audience. And that's how it happened. That's how it started.
So there's lots of coaches out there. I mean, I left the sport, like, I did it when I was young, and I left for like 18 years, I think it was. And I came back and I'm like, coaches?
Right.
What? Like, this is, so there are lots of them. I'm curious, why did you choose Coach David? What about him?
Well, in fairness, I didn't have any other coach to compare it with. So I knew that there were some other coaches out there. But a few things, what I would say is I knew myself too. So you got to know kind of what you're in for. And I know that for me, in order for me to get the most out of it, I had to take it seriously. I also had to form a relationship with the coach. That was important for me. I wanted to be able to have a relationship so that what didn't exist in the program, the connection and understanding and discussions about cycling, I could have. And there are a lot of probably other programs out there that don't have the personal engagement with the coach. And I think there's nothing out there that has the community that CIS creates, so that it becomes a collective process of learning and sharing experiences and support for each other that comes with the CIS community, which is really the CIS family. So I think the differentiators for CIS were, for certain, the community of other cyclists at varying levels of skill and ability. But it was Coach David's approach to being willing to form a relationship and not just have a transactional online or digital exchange where you're exchanging text messages and talking about, okay, here's your next workout, do this, this, and this. So it was a holistic approach that really proved key for me, because when I got into the program, I was not in shape. Not only was I a novice rider, but I wasn't in physical shape. So for me, in order to buy into the CIS program, in, in order to follow the program, I had to buy into the philosophy behind it. And the only way I was going to do that was be able to have this community and the relationship with Coach to kind of bring me along as a person, as well as on the bike.
Describe that philosophy, like the CIS philosophy. How would you describe to someone, you know, who's never heard of it before? Someone who's a rider, someone who's a cyclist.
Someone who's a
You talk.
cyclist. That's an interesting point. I think the stronger I've gotten as a cyclist, the more questions I get about CIS. Their CIS is known in this market, but there are riders out there who are like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to get on my bike and ride, which is, you know, fine. But as I've gotten stronger, it's clear that I'm doing something that they are not. And so that generates the questions. And so what I tell them, and it depends on the person, but if I'm talking about cyclists, what I tell them is that, you know, number one, you get a community where you learn as much from the coach or from the community as you do from the coach. And number two, you know, what I tell them is that, you know, you learn the benefit of indoor training in a way that you cannot replicate outside. And for cyclists, they get that part of it. Kind of a light goes off. And when I explain the efficiency that I get from CIS, the training efficiencies, they start to understand why I can sit indoors in the winter in the basement and shred away and not go outside for months on end until in the spring. I think for cyclists, it's especially cyclists who are like me, you know, they have lives, they're middle-aged, you know, time is of the essence. Your time is precious. And I think for people who are at a certain level of fitness or strength, it's the amount of efficiency you gained in less time that always gets the attention of other cyclists. And the proof is in the pudding. It's at a certain point, you know, the CIS members are their own best examples of the program. And when they see us, the questions are kind of answered.
Is there a moment for you, like where you had an epiphany, or a moment like, you know, oh my God, I'm strong, or I can do it? Like, is there that exact moment that you can recall? Like where you went from I'll ask you when you went from a bike rider to a cyclist.
Ooh. Yeah. I think that moment came last year during the summer, where I had moved, had life changes, and I had to come off the bike for a few months. Packed everything up and you know, reshuffled, changed jobs, and I had to kind of get back on the bike. And I got back on my CIS program. And so by the summer, you know, I felt some insecurity. I didn't feel like I had really done the work I had done that I needed to do over the winter. But I realized that I still, there were a moment I was doing a century, actually. I was doing a century ride with a group. And it was a sponsored ride, so it was fairly big. And it was sweltering heat, oppressive, humid heat. You know, the gnats and the flies and the insects. It was like a biblical plague all around us. It was crazy. And, you know, everyone's getting depleted. And I talked to Coach. I said, beforehand, I talked to Coach David. I said, I need to get ready for this. Let's talk about game plan. He gave me the game plan and he said, just keep your powder dry and be patient. And by about mile 70, that's when you're going to separate yourself. And I was like, what are you talking about? How do you know that already? I'm like, by mile 70, I might be separating myself from the peloton. Okay. I might be packing it in. I don't know. But sure enough, about mile 75, something clicked. Something clicked inside me, and I saw my mind went somewhere else. It was almost on autopilot, and all the tools that I had learned through CIS about maintaining cadence, using my aerobic system, kind of smartly exchanging between my aerobic system and my muscular system. It all just went on autopilot. And I looked around and, my comrades who were with us, they started to fall off right around mile 75. And the last 25 miles were an absolute breeze. And I hit all my goals for that ride. And it just showed me that sort of the training that I had was sufficient. And, Coach always talks about it all the time, trust the system. And, with cycling, there's a moment when you have enough fitness and you can stop worrying about, can I do this ride? And you just focus on the ride. And that was that moment when I stopped having anxiety about whether or not I could actually survive the ride without dropping or dropping dead, metaphorically. And the fitness was there, and you just go to another level. And all the things that Coach David had talked to us about, when you talk about sort of pulling levers and becoming skilled as a cyclist, that's when I realized I'm no longer just riding a bike. I'm a cyclist, because I'm pulling levers that, whether it's gearing, cadence control, you name it, it just all came together in that moment.
That's great. It's a great story. We're almost done here.
Yeah, no problem.
What's your advice to someone who's new to the program? What would you tell them?
I would put it in two different categories. I'd say if you're new to the program and new to cycling, or you're, say, not fit, and so this is as much exercise as it is kind of learning, just be patient with yourself and don't be intimidated by the program. Make the program yours. There are going to be moments when the barrier for entry may seem intimidating, because you're cycling 5 days a week, you're balancing all your life challenges and the technology challenges of Zwift, of riding indoors. Don't underestimate those technological challenges, but just understand that if you can get comfortable with the technical glitches, the mechanical failures, all the challenges it takes to sync all your gear and your instruments with Zwift, and if you can get comfortable in being uncomfortable, just ride that out. It gets easier, and you will get to a point where you can actually focus on the training and not all this other stuff that it takes to just log on and go. That's what I tell kind of the true beginners. For people who are new to the program but not new to cycling, I would tell them, give yourself a month. Give yourself a month and all your questions will be answered. Because if you're already familiar with cycling or just coming back, all you have to do is get into it for about 30 days and mix in some Wednesday Worlds rides with that, and you won't have any more questions after that.
Yeah, maybe in the last 10 minutes of Wednesday Worlds, you'll be incapable of asking questions.
It took me a long time to get over the mental hurdle of Wednesday Worlds, but the first time I did bring the watts, I got in 7 laps, and I thought, I thought, you know, my heart was going to come out of my chest. It felt violent. It felt violent. That's what it felt like.
It is, man. It's brutal. So let me ask you, honestly, like, what's the thing you hate most about the program, about formalized training? Like, what do you just dread? What's the thing that you have to, for you personally, you have to overcome every week?
The Sunday rides, which are usually the Sunday rides at the period of the program where the Sunday rides are like 2 hours and they're like active recovery. It's usually after a pretty brutal Saturday ride, whether it's Super Saturdays in the winter or it's outside. Say usually, you know, the Saturday ride is pretty challenging, right? The Sunday rides are the most brutal, because you've got to have the discipline to get on and stay there for like 2 hours. And, you know, there's almost a perverse kind of irony about a hard training ride. It's hard, but it takes your mind off of the time. So your body is just completely immersed in executing minute to minute to minute, right? Whereas with the active recovery ride on a Sunday, your body is not challenged in that same way. So your mind is kind of everywhere, and it feels like true suffering, because to be disciplined, you got to stay in recovery heart zone. And it is tedious. It's 2 hours of tedium that drives me crazy. I struggle with the Sunday rides and those specific kinds of Sunday rides. That's my biggest challenge.
I hate them with time stops, man. You'll be right. I totally agree with you. I would answer the same way. It's like you're 5 minutes in and you're like, oh my God, it's only been 5 minutes.
Right.
And your heart rate's zone 2, like no music work,
zone one.
Zone 1. Yeah. Zone 1. I mean, the heart, like the music, like I can't, like, it just doesn't stop.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's the only day of the week. And I will tell you, I got to the point, this is where I remember when I first started CIS, there's a question about, in the chat, people were saying, yeah, I need my headphones to ride. And I remember Coach saying this when I first started. He said, I wouldn't recommend it. He was kind of soft and I wouldn't recommend it. I realized what he meant. There's a certain moment where I didn't need any distraction. And I felt like any music would separate me from the bike. So like, I now have the focus. I can do both, but there are key rides, key moments, indoors, outdoors, where I don't want to be separated from the bike. The only time where I absolutely need music for sure, or a damn TV show, is on those Sunday rides. I got to have something.
Oh,
I got to have something. Otherwise I won't get it done. I won't get it done. It's like watching paint dry, except you're the paint. That's awesome. What it feels
like. All
right.
So my last question, let's flip it around.
Okay.
It can be the hardest thing you do, but that brings you the joy, but a training, indoor training, specifically indoor training. Tell me about the opposite of what you just said. Tell me the thing you look forward to. And it may be the thing that's the hardest of the week or not, but what's the thing you dislike? And when you're done with it, you're like, I'm a monster. I am that was, I can do it.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, so I'll it's a 2-part answer. I think it used to be Wednesday Worlds. So the Wednesday Worlds ride was this, kind of ungainly beast.
I'm gonna interrupt you. Give me the context. Tell me what you're answering here.
You're asking me what ride I'm doing, what training ride just gets me amped, and when I do it, I feel like, I've nailed it. I live for this moment. This is why I'm here. That's the question. So for a long time, it was Wednesday Worlds. Getting on that Wednesday Worlds ride was this, this ungainly beast that when I first started, I got dropped all the time, right? I was in the second group, if there was a second group. Over time, I got stronger and stronger to the point where last year, being in Wednesday Worlds, in that last 10 minutes, I would live for that last 10 minutes. And I felt like if I could keep pace or leave people, that's where I did it. And I think on one ride, I actually left everybody and caught Coach David. And I was like, okay, all right, this is what I'm here for. So that was, I'd say that was the biggest one. But nowadays, I'm sort of strong enough where Wednesday Worlds is just kind of a, it's a maintenance ride. It's a maintenance ride. Super Saturdays. That's the training ride I look forward to, because it's a mixture of structure, and then Coach David will throw in a curveball here and there, a sprint here and there, or something toward the end that really is extra punishment, on top of a 2.5, 3 hour ride. But it tests me in every part of riding, climbing, sprinting, being able to be at a steady state. Those Saturday rides are the things that I look forward to, because it's going to challenge me to put all the colors on the palette